All right, let's go ahead and call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. If we can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Doing roll call, we are missing Councilman Lundin and Councilman Heeman, who should be both joining us shortly here, I believe. Looks like we have any public comment here this evening, so we'll move on to new business. You want to move on to E1 right now, or you want to maybe wait till we get a little larger crowd here for that discussion, or what do you think? I'm not sure, I haven't heard anything.
Mayor and Council, we could move on to E2 and 3.
Yeah? Okay. Let's do that. Luke, you want to kick us off on E2 there?
I guess I'm not sure if we should necessarily discuss this a lot but my whole idea with bringing this up was I still think that we should figure out a way to take over Heritage Boulevard. I don't know how we do that or how we format that, but I am kind of, the blame gets put on the city a lot for poor conditions on that road, and I don't think it's right to us or the residents to have to deal with somewhat poor conditions on that road. So I don't know what we can do to take that over. I know we've kind of talked about it briefly in the past, but I guess I was just open for ideas from everybody, or if that was a hard no, or if there's anybody has creative ideas. I know it's not going to be necessarily easy, but
I don't know, I mean, we kind of, that topic had kind of come up when we were talking about the roundabout, I guess.
Yeah.
Briefly. And I can't remember kind of what Justin, what his thoughts were on that, or what the commissioner's thoughts were. I mean, it's been quite a while ago now that we discussed it, but do you guys, anybody recall that at all?
We had discussed it in when we had the joint meeting up here with the roundabout stoplight discussion.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
They had said that they would be interested in hearing more about it. I remember specifically Steve Westerberg sounded like he was maybe interested in hearing more or getting some ideas together, because he must notice it's a problem too. And obviously the county doesn't necessarily probably want to deal with it, but I don't want to take on the burden of the costs either. So it would have to be some sort of joint agreement where, you know, they pay us a portion to take care of that road, and I'm sure engineers could figure out what's the deterioration cost on this road going to cost. You know, and then the county just every year has it in their budget item to pay us to take care of that road. You know, and then they can spend their time elsewhere too. I think our city staff can handle stuff better in our own city than the county staff. So I'd rather see the county focus their efforts somewhere else, but our taxpayers benefit from having, you know, Isani standard roads, city of Isani standard roads, so.
Yeah, I mean, I know sometimes when it gets real bad, our guys even go out and put a Band-Aid on it at the very least to.
Yeah, and the situation that really brought it back again was like 2 weeks ago. They did the patchwork, and it was awful. I drove on it, and it was like it was like golf ball size stuff, you know, that you were kicking up with your car. And I don't know. I asked Justin about that, and he said it was supposed to be less than ½ inch, but there was some stuff that was probably inch size in there, and even ½ inches.
Yeah, I mean, I had complaints on that too, and it is really frustrating because that's where we get the complaints, and it looks bad on us.
Yep, and a lot of people are saying.
To tell people, sorry, there's nothing I can do, you got to call the county. I mean, they don't like.
That's not right.
Yeah, right. You hate to do that.
You know, and there are people. I mean, it's just Facebook, but people are saying, "Oh, you need to vote out council, and the whole city staff needs to be fired and start over new with public works."
Because we can't take care of County Road 5.
That's not fair to us. So
isn't even our problem.
It's not even ours, but that's the perception. And I mean, if I didn't know, but any better, I would think so too. It's right. In our city limits. I mean, it's a block from us right now. So.
Yeah, it is frustrating. I don't know. I mean, Public Works isn't here tonight to kind of ask Matt.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was hoping Matt would be here too.
But
well, isn't Heritage getting resurfaced?
2028. It can't wait that long either. So
from Dowling to the west, County Road 5 will be having some road work and a reconstruction project planned, and then they do have some in 2026 on the east side of 65 over by 8th Avenue over there. We did street sweep twice, since I did that hot patching, because I know we did have complaints. I did ask Matt, our public services director, to go out and blow off or sweep off all the sidewalks, because I think if you are a rollerblader or someone in a wheelchair,
It was brutal.
it was definitely something that was gonna jar you around a little bit. I was hoping the rain would wash it off, or the wind blow it, at least into a street, and that didn't happen since last week, so, Public
that's
Works
some-
crew is gonna be working on that. The process, and I do think our engineer could speak to the process of a turn back from the county. I think definitely we would be looking, if we were interested in taking it on, making sure that it was fully reconstructed back to a really great state, so we're not having to expend too many city funds to get it back up to that state, and then possibly then the city could take it on as a state aid route to try to get some state funds to continue with maintenance of it, but it definitely will be a cost on adding it to the city's pavement management plan and operations for plowing and so forth.
Jason, I mean, you've said, I think Luke has told me anyway, that you've seen it in other cities that have done this, right? So,
Sure, yeah. A turnback is, I mean, relatively common. It's, you know, usually the county doesn't want the road and the city, you know, wants to take it over, and in the end, it's, you know, a cost to the city just long-term, but the process is usually the agreement's written that it's either the city will take it if the county provides the cost to reconstruct it,
Mm-hmm.
and then the city has the money to do that when they want to, or it gets reconstructed and then it gets turned over, like it's brand new, and then from there, we'd be able to have it on our state aid system where we're getting state aid funds for some of the maintenance cost, but those funds aren't, you know, 100% covering the cost. And, you know, and another portion of state aid funds are supposed to be, you know, to build up enough to reconstruct and maintain, you know, down the road as well, but those aren't, you know, 100% covering either. And so the long-term effect would be, you know, will be a cost to the city to take it over. It's just, if at least up front the entire road has been rebuilt, it's, you know, minimal for that first 20 years, aside from the regular maintenance of plowing, street sweeping, and those types
Which
of
we
things.
already do some of that anyways. I mean, we do the street sweeping on it.
So that's,
And stormwater is our responsibility already on there, which is crazy. So-
that's different too.
and hot patching from time to time.
So that's the full turnback where the city actually would take it over. And then the actual limits could be kind of determined as well, whether you're talking just 65 to Whiskey, or to an actual city limit. They don't usually like state aid routes or county state aid routes to end at an arbitrary point. So usually it would be at an intersection or a defined, you know, location. But, you know, trying to figure out what limit would be the switchover would be the other thing that would have to get worked out. And another alternative, after just hearing what you guys were describing, on the regular maintenance side of things, you know, maybe you'd just be able to work out a maintenance agreement where the county continues to own it and has to pay to reconstruct it, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's some kind of maintenance agreement that's just, we have free reign to sweep as much as we want and crack fill as much as we want and whatever, and they reimburse us. Obviously, they're gonna wanna have a say on how much we get after it. Otherwise, we're just spending their money as fast as we want, so there'd have to be something in that agreement on how often or whatever. But from what I'm hearing, that may be more the direction you wanna go, but, you know, it is, turnbacks are, you know, common. It's just, usually the turnback happens because it's not being used as a significant county through road anymore, and in this case, it's not the reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not quite the normal fit for the reason to make it a turnback back to the city, but it still would be able to apply, I believe. But like I say, I'm hearing maybe that's more of an interest in pursuing a maintenance agreement kind of a thing, or possibly a combination of the two, but.
Yeah, if we were to do it, I would personally say it's either the maintenance situation or we just take it over ASAP and they pay us for reconstruction of it and we do it, because there's no way that this road out here in front of the old PD building and the elementary school can wait until 2028. There's absolutely no way. The last winter really ripped it up, when we had all the, the pounding ice, and it's honestly, it's destroyed. So I think that's a big problem for me. I brought it up to the county engineer, and he didn't seem too concerned about it, but I mean, I drive it all the time, and if you walk out there, it's like, man, it's pretty rowdy for having to last another 4 years supposedly. So that's just one of those situations where I don't think they have it as a top priority, even though they should. It's it's the #1 traveled county road in all of Isani County is this one, and it hasn't been repaved since 2004. So
We have Councilman Lundin joining us at 5:11 here.
Yeah, and I was there when you were talking to
Yep.
to Justin there, but his points were they don't have the funds to do it, so they wouldn't have the funds to give to us to do it. So I don't know how, pushing on them to be able to prioritize it would be,
it should have been pushed on 5-10 years ago, though. I mean,
well, yeah, I mean, on the current condition, it looked that way, but, it is only on 20 years, and a pavement, when it goes down, is expected to make it 20 years before you're really doing a major, even overlay, a mill and overlay.
mhm.
And so, you would only expect it, even when it had been done 20 years ago, that your first real maintenance step would be happening
Now,
in these couple of years right now. So it's not that they're too far off on the scheduled maintenance, it's just it has started to kind of get a little away from them. But once they do their crack filling and all the crumbs are gone, is it functional again for a year, and is that their maintenance, game plan to get it to the year that they have the funding? Those are all things that, you'd have to kind of talk with the county about for, prioritizing, I guess.
Steve, we were just talking about potential for some long-term plan to maybe take over Heritage. So it's more in local control. I don't know if you had any opinions on that. I know we briefly talked about it in the past.
County wants to give us the money that they're getting for taxes on it.
That's basically where I'm at.
Reason, otherwise it's gonna put an newer cost on our public works.
Yep, agreed.
That'd be the only reason I would be in favor of that.
Yep.
I don't know if it has to be a turn back. I mean, I think just like Jason said, some kind of a maintenance
Maintenance
agreement
agreement.
might just be all we need. I mean, just so we have the ability to go out there and get paid to take care of it and keep it up. And I don't know if that's something that Matt wants to take on or not. We'd have to kind of maybe talk with him, but I mean, it sounds like a turn back is eventually gonna end up costing the city more money than what it might be worth to take that over. And
But the problem is they're gonna stop it at the city limits on the other side of 65.
on the turn back,
Then they're gonna turn around, they're gonna drive straight through here, they're gonna get on the outside of the city limits on this side and start pulling the road again. That's a tough one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just thought it warranted some conversation. There's a lot of people here that blame those roads on the city staff and us, and I don't think that's fair. So that was basically the whole spiel, I guess, the main point.
This is like Whiskey Road, we're not responsible for it.
Right.
It's county road.
all right, well, what do you guys, do you want Jason to look into that any further, or you wanna just kinda let it be for right now and see how it unfolds here in the future? Or what are you guys thinking?
I'm not sure the best way to approach it. I mean, we briefly talked about it in that joint meeting for the roundabout, and they said they'd be interested in talking about it, so I don't know if that means we need to schedule some sort of joint meeting, or if we just have, the county engineer and the city engineer look into options, or,
I'd have to do that long before I'd have a joint meeting with them.
okay.
Cause you remember what it was talking about,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
roundabout. That's gonna add 10 hours to our day.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think for right now, if you guys are serious about wanting to consider that, maybe we just have you kind of touch base with the county and kind of give us what do we think it's gonna cost to have a maintenance agreement, and is the county interested in doing anything like that? I mean, that would be the first step, just to see if it's, and I mean, what is it gonna cost to actually maintain it and do it the right way, too, would be part of it, so. That may be different than what the county is currently spending, I don't know, but.
And just for clarification, that'd be all maintenance, plowing, hot patching, all that kind of maintenance, or exactly which maintenance, summer and winter?
I mean, it's really the patching that's the
The-
issue,
the
I think. It's-
patching.
Not
They don't get out here in a timely manner, and then, I mean, we had that horrible pothole in front of the tracks last year was just horrible. But,
I was waiting for a Facebook page to start up with that thing.
oh,
Yeah, then
for
the
sure.
city gets sued for somebody for fixing their car, yeah.
Oh, it was bad. So I
maybe
guess
just
really it's just
specific to hot
maybe
patching?
just patching, yeah, that we just wanna be covered for that, and we
Other-
wanna,
I guess maybe there's other things that we could, maybe Matt would know more about what, that maybe he thinks there's something that they're lacking on that we need to do more out there.
yeah.
I was hoping he would be here
But I
for
mean, then
this
that's,
one.
then you're not having to worry about the plowing issue like what you talked about, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem, they seem to plow it fine.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
Yeah, but then, you know, you're talking about filling in potholes and, you know, next thing you know, we're gonna have to start repaving that, and it's gonna be on the city's dime, and where's that all money gonna start coming from?
The only way we could do it is if we'd sent them a bill for services or some sort of an agreement. I mean, they have to know how much they spend roughly on that road, you would think.
Not
So,
much.
no, obviously not much. I don't think they spent much on it since 2004, so.
Other things that I can think of would be painting the crosswalks.
Yep.
Would you want to take that on or leave that on their responsibility?
I've never noticed the crosswalks being bad, but I don't,
I think it's just the patching is really where we get the complaints and where we.
or
if
anything
we-
Matt says, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Matt would be a good resource there too, but I think that's probably really what we're looking at, is that we want the ability to go and patch the holes when they come up and get paid for that, so.
I mean, I would like to see us repave it and have them pay us for it,
Yeah, good luck.
because I don't know how that's gonna happen, but
I
that
doubt
road is,
that's
that
gonna
road is bad, so.
But they're not gonna have the money until 2028 either, so.
yeah.
I mean, it's when they go to do the roundabout, that'd be a perfect time for them to.
That's what I said,
Yeah, would
but they said no, so,
Yeah, as long as we're messing around, but,
yeah, kicking the
Okay.
can down the road, that's, yep.
well, I mean, do you want them to bond for it though too, or do you want, I mean, I think they're probably getting funds, I would guess, to responsibly pay for that, I would hope, but I don't know what their plans are, but
They get loads of money from the state for those types of projects.
Mike's looking at me cross-eyed, so.
They should have had a better CIP plan.
That's, there you go.
It's silly, 20 years, I mean, it's 20 years, and you don't even have it planned? How does,
If you're gonna bond for it, might as well do it now then.
If you're not
Why
looking out
wait?
at least 20 years, you're gonna end up bonding for something. If you're gonna bond for it, well, if you've already given up on that and you're gonna bond, well, then do
Yeah.
it now.
Yeah, let's do it now.
busiest road in the county?
Wait, bond while you can still mill and overlay rather than a full reconstruct.
Yeah, that's true too.
How much would a mill and overlay be on, say, if that was about a mile? I mean, that's that's more involved road than
What, that's-
usual.
What do you think, Jason? Ballpark.
For the whole, like, city limits, it's probably like $500,000 just to.
Oh,
just
okay.
overlay it.
How much longer would that give you, roughly, on something like that?
Depends on the condition of the underlying road. You know, I believe most of the failures out there are surface, so as long as it's not like subgrade failures.
Sure.
You know, usually an overlay can get you 10 years before you gotta do like
Okay,
more of something. You know, but it'll start cracking much earlier than a full, you know, redo. On what they're doing though, they did get the same type of funding that we got for the roundabout,
Mhm.
LRIP funding. And so they're getting a good chunk of money to cover that so that they aren't having to bond as much or whatever. And they're trying to soup up the road section so it will last longer next time, cause it has gone bad faster than you designed to. The traffic loading has gone up. And so it was designed 20 years ago with a projected amount of traffic, and it's, you know, we have more than it was projected to handle, so that's why it's failing faster. And so the only way to get ahead of that is to actually reconstruct it with a thicker section, and that's why what they're doing, you know, in the 2028 project.
okay, so they already have LRIP funding 4 or 5 years ahead of time? I didn't know that was possible. I thought it was only like 2 or 3 years on that stuff.
Nope, it was, I think I guess it's a 4-year cycle, I think, so they got it for that last year.
So they already have the money.
Yeah, they have the money to do it in 2028, so they don't physically have the money. It's slated to receive the money in 2028.
They're
From the
scheduled to
state.
get the money, but it wouldn't be available until that time, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
I mean, that's not I mean, that's a lot of money, but it's not like, that's a kind of a drop in the bucket when you look at how much money our taxpayers pay every year to them. They pay more to the county than they pay to the city.
Well, right, but they're talking money to do complete reconstruction on it, not just milling over.
Right.
Which I don't know what the cost is on that, but I would imagine it's pretty substantial, huh?
Yeah, I think they, also went for the maximum 1.5 million that we're getting for the roundabout, so, I think the project might be more on the $3 million range.
Oh.
And actually, now that I say it, maybe actually that segment was going after federal money also, now that we're talking the details, but either way, I think they're getting about a nice chunk of money covering the portion, but they have to wait till the year that it's allotted from the state or fed,
Gotcha.
Source.
Okay.
Well, let's see what they can do on maintenance.
Yep,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, that would at least kind of solve our issues that our residents are dealing with there, so. All right, do you want to go to E1 now, Mike, or? Okay.
Has anybody reached out to George yet? Maybe he forgot?
I can definitely send him a text.
Okay, thank you.
You got here pretty quick, they were thinking a half hour.
I figured it would be, and depending on traffic. 65 is horrible.
Yeah, the lead foot, huh?
No. Zig and zag.
All right, so to be clear, this is not the rate study. That is a whole lot of work, and that's why I feel like this is barely on.
Your mouse is moving.
Did it change?
Right. Yeah, so to be clear, this is not the rate study, but I do need some input, some direction before I start going down that path. Otherwise, if I start going this way, and you guys would rather have seen me gone this way, I don't really have time to be able to do the rate study twice, is kind of the point here, so. All right, so we'll touch on this. This is, Bolton and Mink has gone over this, right? But fundamentally, we're looking at two problems, right? One is use. Basically is on peak demand days, if our largest well is down, we can't pull water out of the ground fast enough. We just can't, right? So that's kind of the primary deal. The other is that if we don't reduce usage, we're gonna be less likely to gain further access to the Mount Simon Aquifer. Being in the Mount Simon Aquifer is good for us. The odds of us getting a well that shoots out 1,200 gallons a minute is substantially better in that aquifer. Otherwise, we go to other smaller aquifers, we're more likely to see 800, right? Well, suddenly 3 in a smaller aquifer costs more than 2 in the Mount Simon, right? So that's kind of that's the summary version of that, right? And that's just the other point is if we don't reduce usage to some extent, we end up with more capital projects, and they move closer in time. And the next screen, we'll kind of see how that looks. If we go with a best case scenario, and we get to stay in the Mount Simon Aquifer, going all the way out to 2076, I don't have a very big list of capital additions, right? I got 3 wells, a couple towers, you know, a mini treatment plant. But if we end up continuing on the same trajectory for use, and that ends up we end up excluding ourselves from the Mount Simon Aquifer, that gets really expensive on the right-hand side. You know, in unadjusted dollars, right? Because these two totals, 29 million on the left, 60 million on the right. That's not inflation adjusted. That's just today, right? Just to understand a rough double. That makes rates look really, 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 really quite different. Right, and Bolton Mink has also touched on this a little bit too, right? You know, one way to reduce use is enforcement, right? That's something that's been done before, can be effective, but you know, it's got to be compulsory. It can be super expensive, right? Some cities will hire a person full-time. That's a lot of money. And of course, it becomes combative. Nobody wants a full-time staff member showing up at their house saying, hey, tisk, tisk, right? When I think about it, I think more along incentives and disincentives. Really in this, you know, for a water utility, really you're talking about tiered pricing, right? If you're using a reasonable amount of water, you pay a reasonable amount. If you use an absolutely extravagant amount of water, you probably need to pay an absolutely extravagant amount for it, right? But otherwise, let those market forces work. If somebody's like, you know what, gosh darn it, I want 120,000 gallons of water on my lawn each month, then I'm perfectly willing to pay $2,000 a month for it. I mean, that's not the analysis I would take, but if that floats your boat, I mean. So in this, when you think about that, kind of that tiered strategy of if you're using a reasonable amount, you should pay a reasonable amount. If you use an extravagant amount, you probably need to pay an extravagant amount. That's where the bad news is actually the good news, right? So what I did was I didn't do anything complex because I'm trying to not commit too much time to this until I have some direction. I just picked July of 23 as my month I was going to look at. Didn't bother looking at June, didn't bother looking at August. Month of July 2023, 20% of our residential accounts used 55% of the water in that category. And 30% of those accounts accounted for 70%. So you got about 70% of the residential accounts that are using a remarkably reasonable amount of water. Non-residential accounts, this would be commercial, industrial. This would also include HOA and apartment buildings. Residential accounts think one house, one lot, right? Everything else, non-residential. There, it's even more dramatic, right? 20% are using nearly 80% of the water. 30% are using nearly 90% of the water in that category. So this is where you've got a relatively small number, and we'll get into the very details on this next, relatively small number of users putting out a lot of water. So that's the bad news. Good news is, if you want to see per capita use go down, when I'm looking at, most people don't need to do anything different. The majority of residents are doing just fine, doing what they're doing. But we have some users, and we'll get into this on the next page, that are really quite remarkable. And I'm not going to name names, but we can talk about that. We can talk about that after.
Because one of these, my kid is always running the hose.
we can talk about that after, but we don't need.
Is my address one of these?
There's no point in naming names. So, actually.
Are we going to talk about what types of commercial are using the most water? That was my question when I saw this report.
Yes, on the next slide, I will get into, there's some really clear lessons from what I've looked at.
Before we move too far from that idea, though, I was going to mention, I mean, if you have certain residents using more, but you have residents that are, they're living in a house by themselves versus residents where you have a family of 5 or 6 people. Well, obviously, they're gonna use a lot more water. So just to say, well, 20 or 30% is using more, that doesn't mean they're necessarily irresponsible. They might just have a larger household too. So to say, well, if we're gonna do a tiered pricing, then we're just, you know,
Well, we'll get into where I think tiers ought to be and how this would look.
okay.
And also, I can see a lot of data behind the scenes about when that water use is. And when it happens to be every night between midnight and 5 a.m.,
Yeah. Then you know you're,
I know you're not washing your kids at 3 in the morning. So, all right. So residential accounts, and remember, this just think of one house on one parcel. That's what you're thinking about. On the left-hand margin, it's tiered, right? Top 10%, top 20%, top 30%. The next column over, the 221, 441, that's the number in that account, okay? So each level has roughly 221 accounts. We end up at about 2,200 total accounts. When you go down to the bottom, you see the 100, 2205. Total usage for residential accounts, July of 2023, you're talking about 28 million. The top 10%, top 221 counts, use nearly 10 million, about 35% of all that water. The high for that month, we had one house that used nearly 105,000 gallons for the month. And to give you a perspective, the top 10 individual households used nearly 1 million. So it wasn't like we had one person that was at 104. We had several other homes right behind them. And what's interesting here is on that far right column, this is low, right? Those are just the range, right? For that tier, average, high, and low. When you look at the low, that 15,000, I mean, you're already talking at the 70 percentile, right? So it seems to me you could have tiers that are in like the up to 15,000 and up to 30,000 and keep things reasonable. A lot of people irrigate their lawns responsibly and hit about 30,000 gallons. And if they're being responsible about it, that should be a reasonably priced commodity. Also, the median user out of all of this, the middle user, was only 7,400 gallons. Right? If you have a family and you got like 6 household members, right, parents and 4 kids, if you're not irrigating, it's actually not very hard to stay under 10,000 gallons. That's not a particularly difficult task. So in the end, a lot of this usage up there is a really high percentage of this is irrigation. So just kind of think about how that breaks down. And yes, 104 on a single residential lot is a lot. Try to imagine 104,000 gallon jugs on the lawn.
The stormwater is even impacted by that.
Yeah, because you put down that much, it's not all sticking.
Right.
It's just not. Then this is real briefly, this is just that graph, right? Some people are going to be more low visual. I prefer to stare at numbers, but I know that's not everybody else's thing. So that makes it super clear. I mean, you got 10% using a really dramatic amount and 20% using more than the other 80% combined. Now this is the fun one, non-residential accounts. Same setup on the left, percentiles, right, 10, 20, 30, 40. 18 accounts, roughly, per level. Top 18 accounts use 56% of the non-residential water, with our high user at 551,000 gallons for the month. And I can tell you that is an irrigation account only. That's not business use. That is irrigation water only.
So they need their own well.
That's a stunning amount of water to put down.
And the sad thing is it's potable water that they're just spraying in their yard.
It's a stunning amount of water. And this is kind of that same deal where it's same deal. Top 10 non-residential accounts, just 10 out of 183 we have right? 183. Just 10 account for nearly 3 million gallons. And that's just the 1 month. Also, that number one account that hit 551, because I just picked July 23, June was substantially higher and August was substantially higher by about 100,000 gallons. So just FYI, that's actually that's
That's what I was gonna say too. I think July was kind of the height of that drought
Well,
that we
they-
had last year. So I mean,
Yeah, so but that user had more the prior month by about 100,000 and more the subsequent month
right,
by
but I
about
mean,
100,000.
when we're talking about trying to set our tiered pricing, if we're gonna look at that, I mean, are these good numbers to use for setting that pricing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because the fundamental problem is overall use and peak use. Peak use is occurring
Yeah,
on these
okay.
days. So that was part of the thought of
Okay.
just picking July.
Okay.
So top 10, that's 41% of all the water in this category, nearly 3 million gallons. 31 irrigation accounts in this total, out of 183, 31 irrigation accounts are 2.75 million gallons.
How many gallons total were all the residential? Can you go back to that slide again
That's
quick?
about 28 million total for the 1 month.
How many?
28 million,
Okay.
right? So that was 2,200 accounts and 28 million. This is 183 accounts and not quite 7 million. Those are, yeah, when you start using 300, 400, 500, 600,000 in a month, and it's all or nearly exclusively irrigation, that's a lot.
Did you happen to look into the other outlet, the other high ones, to see if those are irrigation, if they're irrigating at those properties, or if would you even know? I'm just curious how many are actually using our water for things that they actually have to use potable water for. Because if you're running a business and you need potable water, it makes sense. But if you're just mowing the damn grass or watering the grass,
Of all the accounts that I looked at, all the high users were totally dominated by irrigation. Right, so like a lot of businesses, I can just look and see, all right, I know you're open during the day. I get a baseline, oh, you might use 100, 200, 400 gallons an hour during the business day, but overnight you're plowing through 5,000 an hour. Okay, well, I know you're closed, you know, so.
I mean, I would imagine though we've got to have some businesses that are, as part of their processing or whatever, are gonna be using a lot of water, right? I mean, Evercat Fuels.
that was my first thought.
Evercat is the one, and they do, and they are part of this, but they have two accounts. And the one that's legitimate business use, cool. Totally understand what's going on there. But they use a like or larger amount for irrigation. And that's not unique for the businesses that are on this list.
When I saw this list, my first thought was the fuel treatment plant. I was like, well, if they're using that much water to make their fuel, that just is what it is. But then to hear it's irrigation, it's like, oh my, are you serious? That just boggles my mind, especially a place like that that's not even a storefront.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed as I kind of looked through these numbers and looked through these different accounts, another theme that seems to stick out is if you're corporate, you use a lot of irrigation. Right, sort of, if I was going to send a letter saying, hey, could I kindly encourage you to maybe use a little less, I wouldn't even know where to send it or have any guarantee of who might actually get it. You know, one of those, right? Well, I mean, because if it's a local business, you just go have a conversation and things work out.
It's like
Not a big
local
deal.
control versus
Right.
federal control, yeah.
Yeah, but so you kind of get the picture on that. Same graph, right? I'm a numbers person. I'd rather stare at the numbers, but not everybody's in that boat. Yeah, that top 10, 20%, that is monstrous use compared to all the other businesses. Remember, this does also include the apartment buildings HOAs, right? So residential is a house, a parcel. So when I think about this, and this is where I'm looking for your guidance, if I'm barking up the right tree, I need to know that so I have some direction on when I'm going forward, and if I'm not, I need to know that as well. My thought is modest increase to accounts for inflation and some capital additions. I think probably everybody, we got to have something has to go up. We haven't raised rates in 3 years. At some point, we're going to have to accept that inflation has been occurring over the past 3 years, and we've got to you have to do something with that.
Did we, I guess I was talking to somebody about that the other day, and they were asking, why are our water rates so high? And
I hear that all the
I
time
don't-
too,
I
all
guess I don't
the
know
time.
what other cities pay, obviously.
Yes.
So I'm not sure, I guess, but if
I
they're
can-
higher than other cities or not, that would be
I
something
can-
I'd like to see, but.
I can bring that back next meeting.
Okay.
I have that. We can put it up on the screen, and in the interim, I can.
And the other
send-
question I had
could
for you
send
is,
the
I
council
thought
members.
that we had talked about a steady increase with the last time that we had done this, and I don't remember if that's correct or not, or if we just maybe talked about it and decided not to, but I thought we were gonna have an increase every year. Did we not do that, or we just left it?
No, the council had two options. We went down and held flat,
Okay.
was what I think.
I thought
I'd
we
have to double check.
discussed something about an increase every year, I think, but so we decided against
Yeah, that was
we lowered
basically the two
rates and
approaches
held it
that
flat.
I said, hey, here's
Yeah.
what we can work out. Here's how they would each look. It's either sort of do a little at a time or just, man, that was the option.
Yeah, and I think we had said we needed another rate study to kind of see how it was coming, because stuff was
Maybe,
changing so
actually,
fast.
yeah, that's right.
We
Yeah.
should be doing a rate study at least every 3 years. You know, maybe if you're an electric utility and you've got some long-term contracts for purchasing, you can push them out 5 or 7 years, but really should be looking every 3 years and saying, all right, from the last one, did what I forecast actually happen? Did we do better, or did we do worse?
I guess
That needs to happen.
for me personally, I would rather see the average household pay less, but the people that are just wasting water essentially pay substantially more, because. Well, yeah, but I see where it says modest increase to account for inflation and capital additions of basically the average household. I would rather see the average household not have to pay more on taxes, because these people that are using water are frivolously wasting it. So I would rather see the average household not go up a dime, but if we really make the tiers hit hard, then we can actually get people to lower their usage. I mean, it's an elastic demand. As price goes up, rates go down.
So this would be kind of the thing, is that we aren't necessarily gonna know ahead of time how much somebody might cut back, right? Like you would literally never catch me dropping $800 to keep my lawn green. It just ain't gonna happen. But for some people, they're okay with that, and apparently there are some people that would be comfortable paying $2,000 a month to keep their lawn green. It's just never gonna happen for me, but if there turns out there are a lot of people that just view that as demand being completely inelastic, and it does not matter what we charge, and we don't see a per capita drop, it is going to end up being that everybody's now gonna have to pitch in, because we're gonna end up with, instead of 3 wells over the next, through 75, we're gonna end up with 9. Well, now I got 7,000 residents that gotta start footing the bill today, because I got, 100 entities that.
I
But
think a
it's-
lot of this is for irrigation, is people need to be educated, because I'm gonna tell you right now, we've gotten 5 inches of rain in the last week.
Nobody needs to water their lawn.
And I have seen numerous yards, and I'm not naming names for people, that their irrigation is going off when it's raining. That's why I brought up a long time ago that we should give them an incentive if they put in the Wi-Fi to control their irrigation. You know, that, if we gave them $50 towards a $150 device that goes off the Wi-Fi, we're saving ourselves money in the long run on that. I haven't put my irrigation in yet. I've been trying to find a irrigation plow to rent. But even if I did do that, I would just buy it myself anyway, because it's ridiculous that these people are watering their grass when it's raining out, and also irrigating when we've gotten 5 inches of rain in the last week. And they're talking rain every day this week still.
Yep.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
right now, we're under tornado watch right now, so we know those storms are coming. So, I think a lot of this should be brought on to some education. I think we should really look into that consideration on doing something that these people aren't running these irrigations. And yes, it is HOAs, it is the townhouse associations, that their irrigations are running when it's raining. And most people that live in those things, they don't even see that water bill for that irrigation, because that just gets added on to their HOAs.
Yep.
So we talk about irrigation to them, they don't care, because they don't directly see that bill. Ultimately, they're paying it because it goes back onto their HOA costs. I do not disagree with his modified current tiered pricing. I don't see anything wrong with that. Yes, reality, water is cheap. It's the treatment of the water that costs us a lot of the money. So I've always been a big advocate of putting a separate meter in for your irrigation, so you're not paying that sewer rate. Because we're adjusting, supposedly how this is working is you pay the sewer rate that you would for, in the winter months through the summer.
Correct.
So, yes and no, it works and it doesn't work.
Yeah, my thought on this is do the tiered pricing, let people respond to the incentive or disincentive before them, and we'll see how this works. We're not necessarily going to know ahead of time, no matter what anyway, but it could be a reasonable foot forward. And as far as the education, the only thing I would guard against is trying to educate everybody. Because I look at these numbers, I don't see everybody having a problem. I see a select
100
percent
people.
at the top that, for whatever reason, and even though we've gotten 14 inches of rain now in June, I spent a few minutes looking through some of the accounts that I know I could take a peek at. Sure enough, every night. It doesn't
So-
matter that we had 14 inches of rain, they're still going every single night full bore.
Because the problem is the people that are running those businesses don't know the difference.
They're not around. Yeah.
Not around, so they don't go out and adjust it.
Yep.
And the homeowners aren't gonna go out, the
Yep.
HOA people aren't going out to adjust those timers, they're not gonna know. So your best thing as an HOA is you gotta go to their board and say, listen, you shouldn't need the water for another month.
So I guess I would rather, just to go based off what I was saying, if we make it so it hits really hard to those top users, and if they don't change, well, that's extra money that we can put in towards the capital improvement plan. So I would like to see, just a model that assumes that nobody's water usage changes if you skyrocket the prices. Just assume that. And then any dollar or any water that's not used as that incentive just pushes our need for investment in our capital further down the road, because people are still reducing. So, I mean, our whole goal was to push the capital further down the road. But if it's not pushed further down the road, well, maybe we can build up some bank based off of these people wanting to water their lawns absorbently. So I guess I would just like to see a model based on no change in use with different prices. But I think this is the best route to go. It would, keep it similar for people that aren't wasting water.
I guess I'd like to know, I think I can get behind that tiered pricing idea, if there's not any change really, or very little change to the lower end of that tier.
Exactly.
And then, a lot more on the high end. And then I'd also like to see what our rates look like compared to surrounding cities too. mean,
And I already have that. I can send that out to council members. That's
Okay.
something I got done here in the latter part of last week. That is super interesting. I'll give you a preview. Maple Grove is ungodly cheap. Smaller communities with declining population, ungodly expensive.
I probably couldn't afford the water, or they had to move
And
out.
like the kind of difference where like combined water sewer for Maple Grove is like $60
Yeah.
a month. You look at a place like Foley, Granite Falls, Malacca, that kind of place, you're talking $250 to $300 a month
For the same amount of water.
for water sewer. Same.
Less users, poor management. I mean,
Well, yeah.
it-
Once you get
all
into
of
that
it.
death spiral of you have capital needs and your
Yeah.
population is declining and your rates have gone up and people use it's like you're going to fall over yourself trying to collect the money and it ain't going to happen. So, okay. If council is okay, tiered structures, we'll kind of stick with the rough math on this. And I mean, some of what I end up coming up with is going to just be a math thing. But
Right.
as long as I know I'm walking generally in the correct direction, that is helpful. So I don't have to do the whole thing twice.
Can we get the slideshow sent to us in the email?
Yes. So we'll do slideshow and
Rates
and
for
rate
sure.
comparison. The other thing, I'm going to leave with one last bit of advice is that, people say, well, water rates are just outrageous. Just remind them that it is about 1/3 of a penny per gallon. Most people don't think about that. They don't realize that might mean I'm using quite a bit.
A lot of people complain about the whack and sack. So I don't know, what exactly is that? I know
Whack and sack is just the fee up front for the developer would pay it to the city, and then that cost would get added or passed on when somebody would come and buy that new home. Sack and whack is the initial hookup. It's the
Okay.
monthly charge that is, you know, what are we at, 11 and 13 or something like that?
Whack and sack and actually our whack and sack fees aren't bad at all.
Okay.
No, I was gonna say, I think we talked about that.
I did
not
those-
that long
I think
ago.
in the
Yeah,
whack and sack is like
I did.
5 grand for both.
It's more than that, I think.
Is it now?
Now we're closer to 7.6 or something like
That's still
that.
quite a bit.
We
But
did.
that's still
we
to pay
looked
for
at-
the infrastructure of tying on to the
Yeah.
sewer and water.
Yeah, and I looked at those in 2019. We did drop them quite a bit then. 'cause
Okay.
We weren't particularly competitive, but at the same time, it's really strange. When I looked at those in 19, you had Princeton at one end, it was just a flat 14,000. They didn't even tell you what was water or sewer, it was just 14.
Yeah, that's-
And then I had Hanover at the other end that was charging 1,500 total. I'm like, well, I don't know how you're paying for anything. I mean,
Maybe that's why I heard about it a lot, because people are still thinking it's back like then, 2019.
But it's still, the whack and sack fees aren't that bad here.
Okay.
They're
we're-
not,
we're-
they're not.
From what I've seen on Sack and Whack fees, we're very much in the middle of the pack, and
Okay.
for the Sack and Whack stuff, in my mind, I'm thinking inflationary. I don't foresee any reason to have a giant change in that.
So as a curiosity, the top user of industrial was at 551,000 in the month of June? Something like that?
July of 2023,
Yeah.
top non-residential user is 551,000 gallons for the
How
month.
much was their bill? How much would their bill be for that, roughly?
Their bills have ranged from about 2,000 to 3,000.
Okay, so say if you quadrupled their price, just a theoretical, and it goes up to $10,000 a month, how long would that take them to pay off a well that's substantial enough for them to irrigate their own?
I think they would change their behavior immediately.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I mean, you make it so they
No,
have to.
Yeah, that might be,
Or
a
they-
little-
or
that
they
might be a
don't
little
know.
on the extreme side, to quadruple it.
I don't know. I don't.
It's interesting you brought that up, because if I was intent on changing behavior at the top level like that, that's what I would say too.
Yeah, because our residents are the ones paying the price for some business that doesn't even have their corporate, and they're not even based here.
Do you
You know?
remember what that?
Yeah, but they're
bill
paying the
cost, though?
taxes and they're paying their water rates and they're contributing just like everybody else is too.
Well,
so.
yeah, that's true, but it's, it's costing everybody,
they're
all the
pro-
residents money, so that's where, you kind of play the,
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that we need to make sure we're splitting that cost and making sure that it's fair to everybody, but
but we also need to limit what's being used.
yeah, no,
so we're not having-
like I said, I'm
Yeah.
okay with the tiered pricing, but I mean, you always wanna
So-
dig at the businesses and there's just
So
no reason
before
for
you-
Well,
that.
it was just
but-
an example.
Yeah.
Before you
Yeah.
go too far in trying to say they'd be better off to put a well in, I have to ask Jason, are they, let's say Evercat Fuels, are they able to put in a 4-inch casing for a well to irrigate?
Each parcel would have to be individually, evaluated if they have enough room, if they have the space.
I'm more concerned with, the water table versus, the,
Sure, so, like I say, it's just specific to the size of the parcel. Evercat may be able to, but also with what they produce, I don't know if there's different rules about how close they can be to what they're doing, and, they may just not be allowed to have one, or they're an ideal, spot to squeeze one in, then they could, put in a reasonably larger, well, and they're far enough away from any other wells that I'm aware of, but there's a lot of property line setbacks and building so it's not just everybody can just throw one in wherever they want,
Yeah, and Josie and I talked about this too, is that if council's on board with, a tiered structure, we're gonna try and keep 70% of the people roughly where they are and ask the highest users to pay more. Her and I are both of the same mind as, gotta have letters going out before the rates take effect, make sure they understand what's coming, understand what they can do, and they have an opportunity to ask for help if that's what they want. Cause I'm looking at a lot of these counts, I don't think it'd be hard to have most of them cut their use in half pretty easily by just doing the same thing, but every other day instead of every day. So,
I guess I would like an educational letter, even to set up an appointment with you, to talk about their usage. I think
I've thought about that too, I could pick 10 or 20 accounts and literally just have a conversation and that's it. And we probably could find a way to save 1 million or 2 million gallons a month just on nice conversations in my office.
Oh, and they
Try
probably,
that
they'll,
route.
they'll be happy too that you know, just
Well,
had
yeah,
an
I mean,
education, you know.
some of these
Right.
businesses with the
You could
corporate
send- You
office,
could
I
send a
don't,
letter out saying, hey, do you want to lower your water rates or lower your water usage?
I would bet some of these corporate offices, nobody probably realizes that they're dropping $2,000 a month on water. There's just, they lost in the shuffle, so.
But I think a little education, like Steve said.
Okay, all right, for me, that's enough to be able to move forward and keep trucking along. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. All right, let's see, do we want to move on and start a discussion on E3 here real quick? And
Sure, so good evening, Mayor and Council. What I have here is kind of a mid-year check-in. These are the 2024 established goals. I have them separated into 3 categories. The first have been discussed and actions have been taken by the City Council. So CASA 5 road improvements, Highway 65 overlay district, signed ordinance revisions, remove dog licensing, newsletter as a newspaper insert, and Last Street Dance, adding a Last Street Dance in October. Below, the next list is 4 items that we have had discussion but no action directed to staff yet, which would be a leaf pickup, equipment, dynamic sign, lighting infill, and then park dedication funds discussion. Again, we've had discussion on those but no final action. And then the remaining list of these items are things that we have not, staff has not received direction from, and looking for direction if we want priority on these items or if we want to have any discussion to have inclusion into the 2025 budget. This would be recession planning, Facebook polls and surveys, Veterans Memorial, reducing overall budget, sidewalk infill. That one, we've had a little bit of discussion on whiskey infill. Archery, Kids Day, fishing tournament, additional parking at Bluebird Park, rubber mats at playgrounds, snowmaker for the sledding hill, and then capital planning for Tyler Avenue and 4th Avenue Southwest.
I mean, a lot of the things that we haven't discussed yet could actually be kind of maybe mixed in with park dedication funds, I don't know. I mean, that if we were to maybe add that to a future agenda for committee of the whole, and I don't know, I mean, are they discussing some ideas on how to use those funds? I mean, I sit on the park board, but I don't feel like we've really discussed, I mean, we had that one meeting where we went and toured every single park and kind of came up with ideas, but
I mean,
since then, I don't know that we really.
That's what the last 2 meetings have been, but the
I mean,
next
kind of, I
meeting,
guess,
we're
yeah,
talking
but-
about the skate park, Bluebird Park, Fairway Greens North Park,
Okay.
Eagle Park, so.
So
it's
we
a
are gonna kind of
direction.
dig
Yep.
into that discussion a little bit deeper, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's brought up at every meeting, but it's not like, that's the goal is to say, okay, well, how do we want to spend this?
The
So,
next 2 meetings will have firm numbers on what those costs are.
Yeah, okay,
And on the leaf pickup subject, I sent probably about 10 emails out to different companies, and I haven't heard back from any of them, so I guess I'm gonna have to get on the ball and call them. I wanna look into, like we talked about, an option that's easily, added on to like a plow truck in the off-season, for a leaf pickup grinder. So I don't know why they haven't emailed me back, but I'll have to start calling some numbers and get more on that.
I think those 4 items definitely are for discussions or lighting infill. I've been on here for 14 years. I've been talking about that for 14 years. So,
And I do think on the lighting infill one, we do have the lighting infill plan, which we've discussed, and I think when we get the roundabout and that project going, that's gonna do a lot of that infill that we've been discussing along Heritage, not all the way to 65, but that one is gonna probably be on the list for a while until, I mean, because we just have a little to do every year, so.
but on the bottom ones, I think the Archery Kids Day and the snowmaker on for the sledding hill and the mats for the playgrounds and, additional parking at Bluebird Park can all be put into that park dedication funds discussion.
yeah.
I'd like to look into the Veterans Memorial, what we can and can't do, where we can get funds for that. That's huge. I'm not a big guy on Facebook polls and surveys, but that's just me.
Well, why don't we go ahead and get a motion here to table this discussion here until we can reconvene.
I'll
Motion
motion
to
it.
table.
Second.
All right, and I have and I guess to table, to
Recess.
recess, yes, thank you.
Motion to recess.
Second.
All right, I have a motion to recess from Councilman Lundin and a second from Councilman Merrill. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. So we'll pick that back up again after our planning commission meeting. And we'll go ahead and move into planning right now.